All right. Uh, Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone who has joined us for the session today or are watching the session recording later. Uh, my name is Vishal Chawla, and currently this is episode number 21, Automation Studio, which is a part of the series SFMC Bootcamp. Okay, a quick introduction about myself. I am a senior CRM manager working at Jellyfish. I have 2 Salesforce Marketing Cloud certifications. And also I am one of the organizing team members of this very bootcamp, SFMC Bootcamp, which is organized by Salesforce Marketers Group, Pardot, Singapore Trailblazer Community Group. Okay, so this session on Automation Studio is going to be split in and will be covered across 2 days, that is today and tomorrow. So this is the entire agenda across 2 days. We'll cover what is Automation Studio, an Automation Studio interface, automation workflow, how the workflow in Automation Studio looks like within Marketing Cloud. What are the different starting sources for Automation Studio? Yes. Then how are the file locations configured? How do we run an automation? What are the different activities that are available in Automation Studio? What are the controls that we have? And lastly, how do we handle errors? This session, I will also be doing a demo. Funny, I guess somebody is unmuted. Okay. Yeah, sorry. So along during the session, I will also be doing a live demo in the Marketing Cloud interface. So I'll be covering both theory as well as practical side by side. And the split across 2 days is this particular section, which is Automation Studio activities. So there are a number of Automation Studio activities. I will be covering few of them today, and remaining activities and the rest of the topics will be covered tomorrow. Okay. So first, what is Automation Studio? So within Salesforce Marketing Cloud application, you have different suites like Email Studio, Mobile Connects, Journey Builder, and so on. So each of these studio provides you a set of features to achieve a particular task, like configuring your emails, content, creating a journey, and so on. So just like that, Automation Studio is one of the studios under Marketing Cloud. And when do we use Automation Studio? We use Automation Studio when we want to automate some process, and what that process is, that process could be a multi-step marketing or a data management process. So it could be an automation that has a series of steps, and each of these steps could be used to either carry out a marketing activity like sending an email, sending SMS, or majority of times it is about data management, like extracting data from a data extension, importing it from an external platform to Marketing Cloud, exporting from Marketing Cloud to other platform, or some sort of a data processing using SQL queries and so on. So Automation Studio allows you to execute such activities in a multi-step format and on different time intervals. Like it could be immediate, like run the automation now itself, or it could be triggered by a certain process, which we'll see in subsequent sessions, or the automation could be scheduled to run on a specific interval, for example, hourly, daily, weekly, monthly, and so on. Right? So those are the key features of Automation Studio, why Automation Studio is used. An Automation Studio workflow canvas allows you to build, so workflow canvas within the interface allows you to build these single or multi-step automations. Okay, so when we go to Marketing Cloud, this is how the Automation Studio interface or the main Automation Studio page looks like. So left-hand side, we have a search bar wherein we can search across all the automations. Then we have this section wherein all the automations that we have configured within the account. We see all the folders for those automations. And once we click on any particular folder, we see on the right-hand side all the different automations that are present inside that folder. You also see date modified, last run, when this automation was run last. You can switch the view of this particular section. Also, there is a summary on the right-hand side, shows you a summary report of all the automations. If you want to view a summary by day, particular date, by week, and so on. And yeah, you can also configure how many automations you want to view in this particular list. And this button, new automation, you use to create a new automation. So this is the main Automation Studio overview screen. Now, when you click on a particular automation, let's say you click on demo, then you're taken to the next screen, which is that specific automation wherein you get many options to configure that automation. So in terms of configuration, you have options to configure what is the starting source going to be for this automation. Will this automation run on a file drop, on a schedule, trigger, and so on? I'll talk about these in detail in subsequent slides. Then what are the different activities? Like here, the three activities that we see, 1.1, 2.1, 3.1, are the three actual automation steps or activities which I mentioned here, like the marketing or the data management activities. These are the actual activities that perform the automation task, and together everything combined is a single automation. Right. So left hand side, you will see different activities that you can select to configure your automation. Then you have an option to save the automation. While working on it, you can save the automation. You can use this option, run once. If you want to run the automation now, run once now itself and see how it is performing. You want to test that. Then there is an activity tab, which also I'll show you. Yeah. So under the activity tab, you see the health of this automation. So for example, this demo file to automation, we can see that it has run 4 times with success, and twice it has failed with some errors because of some issues in the configuration. So this shows an overall health report of the automation. Average runtime is 31 seconds. So on an average, this entire automation across all the 3 steps, 1, 2, and 3, takes 31 seconds to run. Notification settings, you can configure your email address if you want to receive notifications for error or on completion. So if you don't want to receive notifications for every time the automation is run, then you can skip the run completion, but runtime error is a must. You should configure an email address that will receive a notification if in case there is an error, because once you configure the automation and set it running, then it will run every week, every month, or whatever is the cadence that you have scheduled. So if in case something goes wrong, if in case there is an error, how will you come to know, right? So it is important to configure an email address under notification settings. Yeah, there's a date range if you want to see. So basically, this table or this list view is a log of how the automation has run. So like how many times it has run. If you want to see the log for a particular date range, you want to see the log by all automation by status. So all complete error. You only want to see all the error whenever there was an error while running the automation, or all those automations that were stopped manually. You want to see those, then you can use this filter. So yeah, this is the activity tab. Okay, so within this automation studio interface, when I showed you this interface, I told you that there are these are the three activities that do the actual automation task: 1.1, 2.1, and 3.1. So this area is basically called the workflow. So a workflow is nothing but a sequence of individual automation activities, right? Now, within this sequence, you'll notice that there are steps in the sequence. So that means step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, and so on. And within a single step, also you can have multiple activities. So step 1 has got only one activity, 1.1. Step 2 has got two activities, 2.1, 2.2. Step 3 has got only one activity, 3.1. So how this workflow executes is all the activities within a particular step can run parallelly. So if there are 5 activities under step 1, all 5 of them can run parallelly. And since they are able to run parallelly, we need to design them in such a way that there is no dependency between them. Right. So the automation should be designed such a way that if one is running and other is also running parallelly, they don't depend on each other for data or any process and so on. So that is when you decide that, okay, you can put these activities under same step. But if there is a requirement for a sequential execution wherein you want step 1 to complete first, that will give you some output. That output would be used in step 2. So there is a dependency between step 1 and step 2. In that case, you should place the two automations in different steps. So in that case, what will happen? All the activities under step 1 will execute first. Then it will go to step 2, then execute all the activities 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, 2.4, as many as there are there parallelly. And once all of them are complete, then only it will go to step 3. Right. So within an individual step, there can be parallel implementation, but across steps, it's a sequential implementation. And wherever there is an error at any particular step, for example, if the step 1.1 itself throws some error for whatever reason, then the automation will stop right there and then, and the subsequent steps will not execute for that particular iteration. So let's say this is an automation that is supposed to run daily. And if, let's say, 2.1 fails today, so the automation will stop at 2.1, depending 2.2, we are not sure whether it was completely run or not. But as soon as 2.1 throws an error, it will stop here, and 3.1 won't run in for that day. Now, let's say the automation is configured to run daily. So tomorrow when this runs again, tomorrow it will try to execute 1.1, 2.1, 2.2. And tomorrow if 2.1, 2.2 run without any error, then it will go to 3.1 and then run 3.1 also. So yeah, that's the idea of the automation workflow. So, okay, now entry sources. So as I showed you in this particular screen, that we have different options basically to configure a starting source or an entry trigger for that particular automation. So we have configured the automation activities, but now we need to decide when should this automation run. Should it run every hour, every week, every day, or it should run as and when some particular data is available within Marketing Cloud? And Once that data is available, then only the automation should run to process that data. And let's say for some reason, we are not really sure when would that external data be available. It could be once a day, it could be thrice a day on some days, and maybe twice a day on other days, right? In that case, if we are not sure about the schedule, but if we know that the automation should run only as soon as the data is available, then that is another type of automation entry source. So basically, first option is schedule entry source, very straightforward, starts an automation at specific intervals. So let me do this. Let me also go to the interface. Yeah, so this interface overview, we already saw the different sections, right? So I'll start by creating a new automation, and I'll select entry sources schedule. So when I select schedule and I click on configure, I get different options. What is the start date? When should this automation start? The date I can set, let's say Monday. I want to run this at 9 a.m. I can select the time zone, and then I can also select whether this should run only once. Monday 9 a.m. should it run only once, or it should run hourly starting Monday 9 a.m. daily, weekdays, weekly, monthly, yearly, and so on. And if, as soon as you select the other options, then you get further configuration options like every 1 hour, every 2 hours, and when should this automation end? Should this automation end on a particular date, or it should never end? It should run hourly and keep on running, or it should end after it has run maybe 10 times. So depending on the requirement, depending on your campaign, data processing requirement, automation requirement, you can select the frequency, the schedule for this automation. Right. So this is schedule as the starting source for this automation. Going back to my slides, the second option is a file drop or a trigger entry data source. So file drop or trigger. Now, what's the difference between these two? File drop starts an automation when a file is uploaded to the enhanced FTP. So enhanced FTP, what is enhanced FTP? Enhanced FTP is the FTP solution that is provided as part of your marketing cloud account. As part of your marketing cloud instance, you get an FTP account setup that is called enhanced FTP, exact target enhanced FTP basically. So if you want your automation to run as soon as a file is uploaded to your marketing cloud accounts FTP, then you use the file drop option. And then there is this third option, which is trigger, which is kind of similar to file drop, but in this case, the automation starts when a file is uploaded to an external location, such as Amazon, Azure, or Google Cloud. So you can configure these external cloud platforms with your marketing cloud account. And as soon as a file is dropped into these cloud accounts, a trigger, your automation is triggered, and then whatever steps you have configured inside this automation, they start executing. Right. So let me now show you the file drop automation. So under file drop, you get different options on to select the file, which I'll talk about sometime. And trigger, if you see trigger, okay, right now my marketing cloud account is not integrated with any cloud platform like AWS, Google Cloud, and so on. But if those are integrated, then you will see some options here to configure this. Right. So this is step one, selecting the starting sources. Then step two is selecting the activities that you want the individual activities, the individual automation steps that you want to run as part of this automation. Right. So as I mentioned today, the session will be split into two, today's session and tomorrow's session, and we'll cover all the file related activities, that is data extract, file transfer, and import file in today's session, and other major activities that we use generally in our automations. I'll cover those in tomorrow's session. Right. So today we'll talk about the file kind activities, and also we'll try to understand the file drop. So in order to understand that, there is another important concept that we need to understand: the different file locations that are configured in our Marketing Cloud account. So yeah, this is a screenshot that I have in my slide, but if we go to setups, data management and file locations, this is where we see what are the different file locations configured that are going to be used in the automation studio by the different activities, individual activities. So by default, you would only see second and third. The first one I have configured, that's a custom file location, but by default in all the accounts, you will see first and second. So the first one is Salesforce objects and reports. So if you have Marketing Cloud Connect implemented, wherein data from Salesforce Sales Cloud CRM is synced with Marketing Cloud, then you can use this option. And if you want to run automations based on file upload, file import, export, all those things with respect to an FTP account, which is called Exact Target Enhanced FTP account, then you use file locations. So if you want to create a new file location, so let's try creating a new file location and see what are the different options. So when you click on create, you see this option, select the type of the file location. So enhance FTP site import directory, which is the default enhance FTP that you get as part of the Marketing Cloud account. Then you can also connect with external FTP file locations. Like if you are using, your client is using their own FTP, they have their own FTP setup, then depending on whether it is FTP, SFTP, FTPS, you can select the appropriate option and configure those so that file can be imported, exported with those. Safehouse is like an internal temporary storage area within Marketing Cloud, which is super secured, and there is multiple layers of redundancy so that your file, your data is never lost, and super secure. And to access that, like, we generally will only be able to access the files which are available in the end FTP, but we generally do not access files in Safehouse from Safehouse. Safehouse is like an internal data storage space for Marketing Cloud itself. So I'll talk about this Safehouse when I talk about the other activities. But yeah, for now you can just understand this is like sort of an intermediate storage space which cannot be directly accessed. All that you access is the end FTP directory or other FTP that you have configured. And yeah, you can also configure Amazon, Azure, and Google Cloud Storage. So the trigger option that I spoke about here, if you want to run this automation based on a file imported in your external cloud platform, then this is how you can select the cloud location, appropriate cloud location, whether it is Amazon, Azure, or Google Cloud. Specify the bucket name and upload the credential file, and then you can create that. For now, for the purpose of this demo, what I did is I created a a file location called users, and I selected the option relative location under FTP site. So what does that mean is you have your import folder, which is created by default. And then I created another folder called users, which is relative to this FTP. And the path for that folder would be import, which is the root folder, inside that users. So that is one file location that I have created. Right. So yeah, it is important to understand the file location concept, because all the subsequent topics which are related to file import activity or the different activities that I told you, like data extract, file transfer, import file, which is somewhat related to, which is more or less related to file transfer, and the file drop starting source. For all of these, it is important to understand the file location concept. Right. So I hope it is clear. If you have any questions, feel free to drop it in the chat box. Okay, and one last topic before we jump into the activities, running an automation. So yeah, in case of file drop and trigger, it is obvious that as soon as the file is dropped into these FTP, into the FTP account or the cloud account, then that will start the automation. So then that means we don't need to configure any other schedule or runtime or anything else for that automation. The file drop itself. So as soon as the file is dropped into that folder inside FTP, the automation starts, right? But if we select schedule as the starting source, then as I mentioned earlier, we have an option to configure the start date, time zone, and interval. And also we would have an option. We would also have an option.
एक काम कर तू जैसा कनेक्शन केलेलं आहे ना त्याच्या पिन काढून ठेव तो बरोबर त्याला किती रवे.
So I think somebody is unmuted. Let me put them on mute. Okay. I think we're good now. Yes. So when we use schedule as the starting source, then we have an option to run once. Right now we don't have any activities. That is why this option is disabled. But when I'll show you, when we configure a few activities, then this option will enable. So then using that, we can also run the automation once without waiting for some file to drop or without dependent on any schedule. We can run the automation now itself. So that's the run one option. So yeah, running an option, you can manually run the option. You can manually run the automation once. And yes, when you select run once, you also have an option to select the activities that you want to run. So let's say you have these two activities and you just want to run the first activity. Then when you select run once, you have that option to select that activity. When I do the demo for these two activities, I'll show you how can I just run one activity. Right? So in run once, you can manually run the automation once with a subset of activities. So you don't want to run both the activities or all 10 activities across all steps. You just want to run 2 or 3 of them. You can do that in the run once. And second option is schedule. Right. So that is it about the starting entry sources as well as the file location. Right. Now we are starting with the section which is automation studio activities. Right. So yeah, before that, let's also see the file drop starting source. Okay. So if I try to configure the file drop source, I see this dialog box, which asks me to select two things. One is the file name pattern, and second is the folder where the file will be dropped, right? So as I told you that I have created this user's file location, which is relative to the root folder. So that is why I am able to create this users folder. Now, when I see this dialog box, I can select one of these two options, whether the file that will be dropped into the folder, will it have a specific file pattern, or it won't have any specific file pattern, and I just want to trigger this automation. Any file, irrespective of file, any file dropped into the folder, and I want the automation to run. Right. So option one, I can specify that within this users folder, if there is any file which contains the name or begins with or ends with, so user data input, right? So if I specify that if the file contains this name, then only this particular automation should start, right? Right. So I can select contains, begins with, ends with. So this is option one. And then, yeah, I can then select a users option here, users folder here, sorry. And when I hover over it, it shows that there is another demo that is configured, which is demo file 2, that is configured for file name pattern contains welcome input. So in this dialog box, if you see the first line, file name pattern, it shows contains welcome input. So maybe I can show you that automation. Yeah, so in this one, I configured this as welcome input. Right, so that is what we see here, that if contains welcome input pattern is already configured by another automation. So this automation you can use with some different pattern, right? So maybe you want to configure one automation for transaction data, one automation for sign up data, one automation for some other event data. So you can, for all of them, you can use the same folder, but use different file patterns. On the other hand, if you select this option, no file name pattern, then you will see that this won't allow you to select users folder. Why? It says the directory is locked. That means you cannot select this folder. Why? Because there is another automation already configured, which is going to listen to this file name pattern welcome input. Right. So that means now if a file that contains the name welcome input is dropped into this folder, and let's say this particular automation is also configured at a folder level without any pattern, then Automation Studio will not know whether it should run the other automation, which is listening for a specific full file, or it should run this automation, which is listening for all files, because both the criteria satisfy in this case. Right. So that is why Automation Studio will not allow you to select the same folder. Maybe you can create another file location, just like how I created users. You can have other folder, maybe transaction data. And then if you do not want to specify a file name, let's say it is not possible to have a same pattern in the file names, and you want to select the option no file pattern, then you can create another location like this file location and select that. Right. So I hope this is clear. This is sounds a bit complicated, confusing, but yeah, it's very important to understand how this should be configured, and depending on how the file that is going to be dropped into the FTP, you can select the appropriate options. Right. So that this is regarding file drop configuration options that are available as a file drop starting source. Okay, now we move on to the Automation Studio activities. So the first activity is called file transfer activity. So within the interface, you will just see an activity called file transfer activity. But the file transfer. What if the file is okay? I am checking. I saw a question in the chat box. What if a file is not found? File is not found. Do you mean file is not dropped in the FTP location? See, here in the interface, all we are doing is we are just configuring that when this automation goes live, you can expect this type of file to be dropped in the FTP folder, right? So you are just configuring this, that let's say the pattern is test -1, 2, 3, 4. So you're just configuring that whenever there is a file with that contains test -1, 2, 3, 4 in the name, then this particular automation should run. Now, if the file that is dropped in the FTP does not contains this, that means the file can still be dropped in the FTP folder, but this automation will not trigger. This automation will not start. Right. So this is configuring configuring a listener for this automation, an event, a trigger that look for this pattern in the file. If this pattern is found, then kickstart this automation. If this pattern is not found, forget about it. Let the file stay in that FTP folder. Maybe some other application, some other automation is using that, but I don't want to start this particular automation. I hope this is clear. Okay. Then, yeah. So going back to the activities, as I was telling you, there's only one activity called file transfer. But for the purpose of understanding, it is easier to understand this file transfer activity in two types, inbound and outbound. And I'll be honest, this I was going through one of the videos that was done by Shibu, who is also a Trailblazer community member, and this is how he explained the file transfer activity, and I understood it very well with this approach. So I thought I'll continue this and I'll try to explain in the same fashion. So file transfer activity can be understood in two types, as in file transfer can do two type of activities. One is inbound. Inbound means external file being uploaded or being transferred into Marketing Cloud, or file transfer activity configured for an outbound activity. File transfer activity configured for inbound activity or for outbound activity. Now, in case of inbound activity, what file transfer activity can do is, file is uploaded. Let's say there's a file which is zipped and is also encrypted, is uploaded into the FTP folder. So here the name is file.zip.pgp. Then step one is, as soon as that file is uploaded to FTP, to import that into Marketing Cloud, it has to go via two steps. First step is using a file transfer activity. And under file transfer, you use the manage file option. So I'll show you in the interface that under file transfer activity, you have two options, manage file or move file. So you use manage file option when it is an inbound data transfer. And the first step to be performed is to unzip or decrypt the file and place this file into a safe house. So as I mentioned earlier, safe house is sort of an internal file or data storage location for Marketing Cloud, which isn't directly, generally is not accessed directly, right? So step one is move the file from an external enhanced FTP folder to safe house while unzipping it and also decrypting it. And again, for the encryption and decryption, you have certain options in setup wherein you can configure the decryption key, the keys that are used for encryption. So that can be configured separately. But as part of the file transfer activities, this is step 1 is done by file transfer. And then step 2, which is moving the file from Safe House to Marketing Cloud. Let's say you want to upload that file, that data into a particular data extension. That is done by an import file activity. Right. So import file activity, we'll talk about it separately, but for now, to understand that file transfer activity, the inbound option or the manage file option can be used whenever an inbound data automation activity is configured, and file transfer in that case is used as step 1. Now for outbound, where the file data is exported from Marketing Cloud to an to FTP. And the data in this case maybe resides in your data extension, right? So again, this will be 2 step. Step 1, you use data extract activity, which exports data from data extension and uploads the file to Safe House. And then again, you use the file transfer option under the move file option and for the file transfer activity, and you use that to encrypt the file and place it into the FTP folder. And from that FTP folder, it can be accessed or can be picked up by an external resource, right? So file transfer activity can be used in inbound and outbound data transfer. For inbound transfer, it will be used as step 1. Basically, file transfer is used whenever there is an encryption, decryption needed, and also transfer a file from between Safe House and FTP. In case of outbound, it will be used as step 2. So inbound, 2 steps: file transfer followed by import. Outbound, data extract activity followed by file transfer. Right, so I'll talk about now import file and data extract activities. Import file activity and data extract activity in these 2 slides, which once again, to reiterate, these are used along with file transfer activity. So the entire procedure or the entire automation of inbound ingestion of data or outbound exporting of data to and from Marketing Cloud is done with a combination of 2 activities: file transfer plus import, or data extract plus file transfer. Now, what is import? Import, as we saw here, this one, for an inbound activity, you can use a combination of file transfer plus import, same as what we saw in the previous option. But there is another option. If there is no requirement to zip or decrypt the file, then in that case, you can also use import activity directly. Then you don't need to use the file transfer option. So depending on your requirement, your use case, whether there is a requirement to zip, unzip, encrypt, decrypt the file, you need to decide whether to use this file transfer plus import activity or option 2, import activity, wherein directly a data from an FTP is imported into Marketing Cloud data extraction. Right, so this is import file activity. And next is data extract activity. Data extract activity, again, as we saw here. Yeah, when it's an outbound data transfer, then data extract activity is the step 1 followed by file transfer. So data extract activity will be used in such a scenario, and you can use to extract data from a data extension. And that extracted data could be in CSV form. You can zip it, or you can use data extract to extract tracking data, like all email sends, email opens, and unsubscribes, and all the tracking data can also be extracted by using data extract activity. Along with tracking data, you can also use data extract activity to extract audit trail data. Right. So now we'll jump into the interface Just check. Is there any question? What is it? Tracking data. Tracking data. So you have seen the email studio reporting section. You have a tracking option wherein you get a sort of a report of all the emails that have sent out, all the individual jobs. I'm sorry, this is a demo account, so there's no data here, but if in a live account, you'll see all the emails that have been sent out. You'll see a list of all the emails by their name, by the job ID, time that they were sent, status, completed, scheduled, cancelled, and so on. Number of emails that were sent, what was the open rate, delivery rate, click-through rate, and so on. So this is that tracking, that report, that aggregated report that you see here in Sense. So a data extract activity can be used if you want to carry out this data extraction, this tracking in an automated fashion. Right. So for now, let's focus on, or let's go back to the file ingestion, inbound and outbound scenarios. Let's try to understand those. Yeah. So what I have done is I've already configured two automations. So the first one, what I am doing is, okay, let me show you the data extension that I have used here. Okay, so there is a data extension that I used in the previous session for Journey Builder, which is called Tracking Welcome Users. This has got 5 records. And now let's say that the requirement is to create an automation activity that extracts the data from this data extension into FTP, right? So as I mentioned earlier in the slides I showed you, so this would be done in 2 steps. First, we'll need a data extract activity and a file transfer activity. So let me create, this is a new automation. So data extract. Yeah. So I'll create a new data extract activity. I'll say export welcome users data. And then I have to specify the name of the file. So this data would be extracted from this data extension, and then what should be the name of this file? So let's say I'll say export welcome users.csv. And I can also use these strings, which is wildcard specifiers like percentage, year, month, day. So in that case, what it will do is it will, in the file name, it will also add current year, month, day dynamically. So if I add percentage day, then the file could be called export-welcome-users-4, which is today's date. Right. And then here I will say I want to extract data from a data extension. So that is why I have selected data extension, extract. Then I will click on next. Yeah, I'll specify that I want to extract the column headers, and it asks me what is the customer key for this data extension. So I'll go to the data extension, copy the key here, and sorry, yeah, and then click on next. review the summary, description and all is optional, but yeah, it is recommended you should provide proper descriptions. As column headers, text qualified means if your file data will also have double quotes and uses line feed if there is going to be carriage return or enter within your data. So right now I do not have these two, so I'll select false and finish. Right. So this is step 1. Yeah, or basically like how I have named here, I generally name it as DE to safe house. So that makes it clear that okay, this is step 1. Export welcome data DE to safe house. So, just by looking at the name, I would know that, okay, even after this step, the file would just be present in the safe house, but I will not yet be able to access the file. So to access the file, I have to do the file transfer activity, which I showed you here. Data extract followed by file transfer, right? So file transfer is used to move the file from safe house to FTP. So I'll go to file transfer, create a new file transfer, export welcome users data, safe house to FTP. And I'll select second option here, which says transfer the file from Marketing Cloud secure file storage location, which is nothing but safe house, to selected FTP location. Right. So remember in the slide I showed you that within data transfer, there are two options, manage file and move file. Manage file, move file. Right. So a single activity file transfer can perform two tasks, manage file, move file. So in this case, we are using move file. Next, then it will ask us the name pattern. Sorry, I don't remember the name. Was it export welcome? No worries, I'll go back and check. And the destination I'll select as users. I do not want to encrypt the file for now, but if I want, I have the option, and then I have to select the encryption type and so on. Right, so the file names should match between step 1 and step 2. I forgot the file name, so let me go back and see. Okay, this is the file name that I configured in step 1. Right, so I'll go back to step 2 because step 2 is exporting the same file from safe house to FTP. So obviously the file name should match, and if there is wildcard specifiers mentioned there in the first step, then the same should be used here in second step also. Right. So yeah, this is how you will configure step 1 and step 2 when you want to extract data from data extension to FTP. Okay, let's see. Let's try running this. Okay, so now I want to, sorry, for this one, I don't need to configure a file drop because this is from data from Marketing Cloud to FTP. So this one would be a scheduled automation. Like maybe I want to run it every day, every week, every hour, so on. So I've selected the starting source as scheduled, and since I want to run it now, I can select run once option. So as soon as you select run once, see, you get an option. Do you want to run all the activities? Select all activities, or you can individually select. I just want to run 2.1 or I just want to run 1.1. So in this case, it won't make sense to run only one of the activities because the two activities are dependent. But let's say if your automation is like a 5, 10, 20 step automation and you just added a new step and you want to test that step individually, maybe that step and the one before that or after that, something like that, right? So you don't want the entire 20 step automation to run. You just want to run a couple of steps. So then you select run once and then you have an option to select activities. In this case, I am selecting both the activities. And I will run now. Yeah. Hopefully the demo runs. But if in case it does not run, then I have a file ready from my previous automation. I will show that. Okay. Meanwhile, there is an option here which I spoke about earlier to configure email addresses for notification. So if the automation, you want a notification for every time it runs successfully or anytime it runs successfully is run completion, and whenever there is an error or if the automation skips for some reason, then you can configure it here. So the automation has not yet started. You can use this refresh button to, refresh the status. Sometimes it may take a couple of minutes for your automation to start. That depends on the load on your particular marketing cloud instance right now. How many other mails are being sent, how many other automations are being run, and so on. Okay. While this runs, let me check if there is any question. Can you please repeat the reason why we don't need to take file drop as entry source? Okay. So this particular automation, what I am trying to do, the use case here is export data from a data extension to FTP. So this is an outbound scenario that we are trying to run. So whenever this kind of scenario you'll run in an actual live use case, there the automation would be such that you are running the automation every hour, every week, every day, so on. Like you want to create a list of all your active subscribers, your loyal subscribers, and so on, and then export that file to FTP and then maybe use that file in some other platform, in some other system, right? So this is a type of an automation which is not dependent on an incoming file. This is an outbound process, means some process automation is done in Marketing Cloud and the file is sent to external to FTP and from FTP to external system. So that is why this automation does not require a file transfer activity. Yeah, it can also require a file transfer activity in scenario wherein you say that, okay, there is an incoming file and then you run your process automation and in the same automation, you also extract the file and drop it to FTP. Yes, if that's the requirement, then yes, you can select file drop as the entry source. But for this demo example, what I'm showing right now is simply a data extraction from data export from the data extension to FTP without depending on an input file. Then I'll show a second demo of an automation wherein we use file drop as an entry source. And there the requirement would be to ingest a file from FTP to a data extension, right? So I hope this clarifies. Okay, let me, yeah. Okay, it shows it is success. Let me log into my FTP account and see. Okay. Okay, so I am using FileZilla and I have logged in to the FTP account. I did not speak about FTP. I assume this was covered in one of the sessions earlier, but if not, quickly we'll review this. So whenever you want to, deal with FTP, you need an FTP account, which will provide you a username, password, and with that you are able to drop files into this FTP account, right? So this automation, we created this welcome input.csv file. Sorry, we created this export welcome users. Let me download this file into my local machine, into my laptop. And let me see. Let me try to open the file. Okay, yeah. So yes, I see records subscriber 012345, subscriber data 01235 is downloaded in this FTP here, export welcome users CSV. Okay, now let's try the other way around. Let's see if I add a record in this file, and I'll call this 6.
Okay.
I think I need to mute somebody. Okay. So now I have added one new record 006. So right now this is only 5 records. This is a new record 006. Let's say now the use case is that there is an external file that has some data, and I want to import this data into a data extension. So this is an import or an inbound scenario. So in this case, what I've done, simply I've added one new record in the same file, but actual scenario could be like you create a new file altogether. And let me create a copy. And call it import. So let me open the file and show you again. Yeah. So I added this record and I renamed this file to import welcome users.csv. Right. So we'll take a note of this name, and I'll configure this name. When I configure the new automation, let me call it demo inbound. Yeah. Okay. And the previous one that we ran was, previous one was demo outbound. Right, demo outbound was scheduled based automation. Demo inbound, I hope you would be able to guess correctly that this would be a file drop automation. Why? Because this automation is supposed to listen for a particular file that has the name import-welcome-users.csv. And as soon as that file by this name is dropped into the FTP, this automation should be triggered. And then yeah, this automation should trigger, and there should be an activity called import file, which we saw here. Right. In this case, we are in the demo, we are not using zip or encryption. So we are going with option 2. So we are using import file activity to directly import data from a file dropped in FTP into a data extension. So demo inbound configure. I'll say that file will contain a pattern in the users folder, and the file, this will be the pattern import, or maybe I can just say import hyphen. So what this automation will do is it will listen for a file that contains import hyphen in any file dropped under users folder. As soon as this file is found, this automation will be triggered. Right. And now we've just done the trigger part. We also need to configure this activity. So for that, I'll select import file activity. I will create a new, I will say import data, welcome user data. Right. I also have an option to configure notification email address inside the activity as well. Yeah, and I will say that the file that I want to import is called funny. Are the participants not muted by default? Okay, anyways, I have muted them for now. Okay, coming back. So I already showed you the file that I created, import welcome user CSV, and what I'm configuring here is as soon as this file is dropped in the users folder and it says currently no file matching. Right now, there's no file in this FTP. So if you run this now, this import activity will fail. But if in future this file is dropped, this activity will run. Right. So we are okay. So right now the file does not exist, but I'll show you, I'll drop the file in FTP in FileZilla, and then I'll show you that this activity, this automation is triggered. And then I have other options to configure the date format. Like let's say if the date format within your file is a different format, then you select that. If there's some other delimiter used, you can configure that. If there are double quotes, if you want to skip rows with bad data. So there are quite different options available, advanced file options. You can use that depending on your requirement. I'll go with the default for now. Right. And yeah, then it'll ask me, okay, once I have pulled this data, where do you want me to drop this? So I'll select welcome users data extension, which right now has 5 records, but in our text file, I added a 6th record. So we'll see if we are able to ingest the 6th record here. Okay. Now it asks me whether the new file, should that add only, should that update, should that add an update, or should it overwrite? Right. So I think this is straightforward. Do you want to concatenate the data from the file? Do you want to update, add, update, overwrite? So just for simplicity, I'll select override. And next it asks me to map the header row with the data extension. So it is possible that the data in your file has got a different header, different from the data extension fields, right? So in that case, you have an option here to map the headers. So one option is map by header row. In this case, what we are telling Marketing Cloud is that the file and will have the same headers as the data extension. So you can simply map them by the heading row. The second option is map by ordinal. In this case, we are just saying that whatever is column 1, let it go to subscriber key column 2, let it go to email address. So these fields that you see here are nothing but are the fields in our data extension. So if we select map by ordinal, it means just go by sequence 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 and dump them into these columns. Or last is manually, wherein you can select a sample file and manually you can do a mapping that this field should go to this field from file should go to this field from data extension. So you get an option to map them manually. But in this case, the file that we are uploading has got the same header row, which is the same field names as this data extension. So for us, we can select map by header row. Yes. Yeah, so this is a summary. This is the name of the activity. This is the data extension where it should ingest the data into. This is the file location where it should listen to, overwrite, name of the file, import welcome users, CSV, and done. Right. So in here, we have configured two things with respect to file. One is the trigger, which is just to trigger the automation. That trigger will not actually ingest or import the file. That will just trigger the automation. So for the trigger, I just told that look for import hyphen in the file name. No need to provide the exact file name. And second is the import file activity, which does the actual job of ingesting the data, importing the data into a data extension, right? Little bit confusing, but the two things have got different tasks. Then you can save and activate. So activate means the listener is now activated and it will listen for this file in the FTP. As soon as the file is dropped, the automation will trigger. Yeah, so this is my FileZilla. I have the file ready in my local laptop, my local machine. And see right now, if you see the automation, it's not running. But as soon as I upload this file, so this is uploading the file from my local machine to FTP, right? You should see, okay, this automation has started. Automation started, why? Because it saw a file which started with import hyphen name inside the user's folder. So the automation started and then it will run the step 1, which is import activity. And if that is successful, right now we have 5 users. If it is successful, we should see 6 records. This is still running. Hopefully it does not throw any error. Can you extract only new data in the DE added in the last 24 hours, or if the data is scheduled? Yeah, Lakshmi. So for your question, extract only new data in the DE added in the last 24 hours means data extracted. So you mean an outbound data, right? From DE to FTP. So yeah, you can then in that case maybe create another separate filter DE which just has data from last 24 hours and use that DE in this automation to extract only new data. Or you can use a SQL activity, which is will run a SQL activity and just filter the data from the last 24 hours. I'll talk about SQL activity in tomorrow's session, but you can use SQL activity and basically filter out data from the last 24 hours and then configure that in this automation. Okay, it shows success. Yes, 6 records. So the 6th record that I added in my file is entered into the data extension. So that means this automation was success, right? So once again, just to summarize, we did two automations, inbound, outbound. Outbound was from data extension via Safehouse to FTP. Inbound was FTP to data extension. Yeah, so I think with this, the day one, the first half of the session, I think from my side is done. If you have any questions, please let me know. You can drop them in the chat box, and tomorrow we'll cover rest of the activities. Query activity, filter activity, send email activity, script activity, controls, error handling, and so on. Yeah. I'll stop sharing my screen, and if you have any questions, please drop them in the comment chat box. No questions? Okay, in that case, I'll take it that everybody enjoyed the session and understood each and every part that I spoke about. But yeah, if you have any questions, you can use the Q&A form and send us the question, and we can respond it during the EMA session. Yeah. Funny, I think there are no questions for today, so I think we can end the session. Okay. Okay, I think, yes, we can end the session. Thank you everyone for your time. I hope the session was useful. Bye.